A CEO followed his employee home after seeing her scar, and what he saw broke him. He thought it was just a simple cut, but the truth hiding behind her door was something no boss should ever discover. Because this quiet woman wasn't just hurt, she was guarding a house locked up like a bunker, and a toddler who looked exactly like someone the CEO lost years ago. That's when everything exploded. The fear in her eyes, the cameras on her windows, the little boy whispering for protection, and the shocking truth she had been running from, a truth powerful enough to destroy an entire empire. Now the CEO has to ask himself, if the people closest to him wanted this child gone, what else have they been hiding? Can he save them before the danger finds them again? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Devereux Industries' main conference room, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table. June Wallace moved with quiet efficiency, arranging presentation materials with practiced precision. Her hands trembled slightly as she sorted through the stack of reports. She knew how crucial this meeting was for the company's future. Raphael Devereux stood at the head of the table, his tall frame perfectly still as he reviewed his notes one final time. The weight of the upcoming presentation pressed heavily on his shoulders, but his expression remained composed, betraying none of the pressure he felt. June watched him from the corner of her eye, admiring his calm demeanor even as her own anxiety bubbled beneath the surface. "The board members will be here in 5 minutes, Mr. Devereux," June said softly, adjusting the laptop that would project the presentation slides. Her voice carried just enough to reach his ears without disturbing the hushed atmosphere of the room. Raphael nodded, offering her a small smile. "Thank you, June. I appreciate your thoroughness this morning." His words were genuine, warming June's chest despite her exhaustion from the early morning preparations. As board members began filing in, June took her position near the wall, ready to assist with any technical needs. The presentation began smoothly, with Raphael commanding the room's attention as he outlined the company's latest strategic initiatives. June moved the slides forward at his subtle gestures, her movements so fluid they were almost invisible to the assembled executives. Halfway through the meeting, June reached into her tote bag for additional handouts. The bag, perched precariously on her chair, suddenly tipped over, sending papers cascading to the floor. She quickly dropped to her knees, cheeks burning as she gathered the scattered documents. "My apologies," she whispered, mortified by the disruption. As she stretched to reach a paper that had slid under a chair, her blouse rode up slightly on her side. The movement exposed a flash of skin, and something else that caught Raphael's eye mid-sentence. His words faltered for just a moment as he registered what he'd seen. An angry red slash across her ribs, too precise and recent to be an old scar. The sight sent a chill through him, but years of business training kept his expression neutral as he smoothly continued his presentation. June quickly righted herself, tugging her blouse down with trembling fingers. She could feel Raphael's concerned gaze, though he maintained his professional demeanor. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of graphs and projections, but the tension between them was palpable. As the board members filed out, Raphael approached June carefully, keeping his voice low. "June, are you all right? That looked like a serious injury." She stiffened immediately, her shoulders drawing up tight. "I'm fine, Mr. Devereux. I just bumped into a cabinet at home. It's nothing to worry about." Her voice was steady, but her eyes wouldn't meet his, fixed instead on organizing the remaining papers. Raphael noticed how she angled her body away from him, how her hands moved with deliberate control to hide their shaking. "June, if you need any help." "Really, sir, I'm fine." She cut him off, her tone polite but firm. "The presentation went well. Should I send the follow-up materials to the board members now?" He recognized the deflection for what it was, but couldn't push further without risking her trust. "Yes, please. And June. Thank you again for your help today." The rest of the workday crawled by, with Raphael unable to focus fully on his tasks. The image of that wound kept intruding on his thoughts, along with June's too quick dismissal of his concern. He'd seen enough in his years of business to recognize when someone was hiding something serious. As the office emptied for the day, Raphael stood at his window, watching the steady stream of employees leaving the building. His eyes found June's familiar figure as she emerged, her tote bag clutched close to her body. Even from this distance, he could see how she favored her injured side, her steps careful and measured. She paused at the bottom of the steps, one hand pressed against her ribs, before straightening with visible effort and heading toward the bus stop. Raphael's jaw tightened as he watched her walk away alone in the gathering dusk. Without fully conscious decision, he grabbed his coat and keys. The rational part of his mind told him this wasn't his business. She was an employee who had clearly indicated she didn't want his help. But something deeper, perhaps the same instinct that had helped him navigate countless business deals, told him something was very wrong. He made his way to the parking garage, maintaining enough distance to ensure June wouldn't notice him. As he slipped into his car, Raphael struggled with his decision. Following an employee could be seen as a violation of trust, possibly even harassment. But the image of that angry wound and her pained movements overrode his hesitation. "Just need to make sure she gets home safely," he murmured to himself, starting the car. As he pulled out onto the street, keeping June's figure in sight but staying well back, Raphael couldn't shake the feeling that this evening would change things between them irrevocably. The city streets were beginning to fill with the usual evening traffic as he followed at a discreet distance. June's figure grew smaller as she walked ahead, occasionally stopping to press a hand against her side before forcing herself to continue. Each time she paused, Raphael's concern deepened, his fingers tightening on the steering wheel as he fought the urge to pull up beside her and insist on helping. Raphael's dark sedan idled at a careful distance as June boarded the crowded city bus. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the busy streets while he followed the lumbering vehicle through rush-hour traffic. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel, mind racing with questions about what he'd seen in the office. That wound hadn't come from any cabinet. Its precise angle and depth spoke of something far more deliberate. For 45 minutes, he maintained his discreet surveillance, stopping when the bus stopped, moving when it moved. The route wound through the business district and into increasingly modest neighborhoods. His luxury car stood out more with each passing block, forcing him to hang further back. When June finally stepped off at a transfer point, Raphael pulled into a convenience store lot, watching as she boarded a smaller local route. The second bus meandered through quiet residential streets, lined with modest homes and small rental properties. Many houses showed signs of wear, peeling paint, patched roofs, chain-link fences in need of repair. But there was also evidence of pride here. Carefully tended flower beds, children's bikes secured on porches, American flags catching the evening breeze. June descended from the bus several blocks into one such neighborhood, her movements still guarded and stiff. Raphael parked his car around the corner and followed on foot, staying well behind while trying to keep her in sight. The setting sun painted the sky in deep purples and oranges, creating long shadows perfect for remaining unnoticed. His attention sharpened as June's pace quickened, her head turning frequently to scan behind her. Her fingers were white-knuckled around the strap of her tote bag, holding it close against her body like it contained something precious. Every few steps, she would glance over her shoulder, her movements becoming increasingly tense. "What are you so afraid of?" Raphael murmured to himself, ducking behind a large oak tree as she looked back once again. After several more blocks of this nervous progress, June turned onto a quiet street of small single-story homes. She approached one of the modest rental houses. Simple beige structure with white trim that had seen better days. But as Raphael observed from his position across the street, details began jumping out at him. The window frames weren't the standard flimsy aluminum common to rental properties. They'd been reinforced with additional metal bracing. The front door bore not one, but 3 heavy-duty deadbolts, their brass fixtures gleaming new against the weathered wood. Most telling was the small but professional-grade security camera mounted above the porch, its lens scanning the approach to the house. These weren't the normal precautions of someone living in a working-class neighborhood. They were the measures of someone who knew they needed serious protection. June reached the front steps, keys already in hand. Her movements were quick and practiced as she unlocked the multiple locks, her eyes never stopping their surveillance of the street. Even after opening the door, she took one final sweeping look around before slipping inside. The locks engaged again with audible clicks in the quiet evening air. Raphael remained in his position behind a large tree across the street, his mind churning with questions. The security measures, June's perpetual alertness, that terrible wound he'd glimpsed. They painted a disturbing picture of someone living in fear. But of what? Or whom? As these thoughts raced through his head, movement at one of the front windows caught his attention. A small figure appeared, barely tall enough to peer over the windowsill. Raphael's casual observation transformed into shocked scrutiny as the porch light illuminated the child's features. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. They were the same warm brown shade that had sparkled with his brother Daniel's trademark gentle humor. The high cheekbones, the slight tilt of the head as the child looked out at the darkening street. Every detail was a punch to Raphael's gut, triggering memories of childhood photos, family gatherings, his brother's face animated in conversation. The toddler couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 years old, just the right age to have been born around the time of Daniel's death. Raphael's hand shot out to grip the rough bark of the tree, suddenly grateful for its support as the implications slammed into him. His breathing became unsteady, each inhale feeling inadequate as pieces began falling into place, pieces he hadn't even known were missing. The child's face disappeared from the window, but the image was seared into Raphael's mind. The resemblance was undeniable. This wasn't just coincidence or his imagination painting familiar features onto a stranger's child. Those were Devereux features, his family's features, looking out from that modest rental house window. His brother's features. The bark bit into his palm as his grip tightened, his other hand coming up to press against his chest where his heart was pounding painfully. The truth was there, clawing its way into his consciousness with devastating clarity. This child, this toddler living in secret behind reinforced windows and multiple locks, bore the unmistakable stamp of Devereux genetics. The implications were staggering. If this child was who Raphael now suspected, Daniel's son, then everything about his brother's death, everything about June's presence in his company, took on new and terrible significance. The careful way she guarded herself, her insistence on privacy, the security measures that seemed excessive for the neighborhood. All of it spoke of someone protecting not just herself, but a precious secret. The evening air felt thin as Raphael struggled to steady his breathing, his eyes fixed on the now empty window. The light inside cast warm rectangles on the small front lawn, and somewhere behind those reinforced panes, a child who looked exactly like his dead brother was going about his evening completely unaware of the man whose world had just shifted on its axis. Raphael found himself moving almost without conscious decision, drawn towards the house by an invisible force that overwhelmed his usual careful restraint. His footsteps seemed unnaturally loud on the quiet street as he approached the front door. The porch light cast harsh shadows across the worn welcome mat as he raised his hand and knocked, firmly enough to be heard, but gentle enough not to frighten. For several long moments there was only silence. Then came the sound of multiple locks being unfastened, and the door opened just wide enough for June to peer out. The instant she recognized him, fear flashed across her face like lightning in a storm cloud. Her fingers tightened on the doorframe until her knuckles went white. "Mr. Devereux," she whispered, voice tight with tension. Before he could speak, she slipped through the narrow opening and pulled the door closed behind her. "Please, you shouldn't be here." "June," Raphael said softly, noting how she positioned herself between him and the door. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." She shook her head, wrapping her arms around herself as if cold, though the evening was mild. "You don't understand. You can't be involved in this. Please, just go." "The child I saw in the window." Raphael pressed gently, watching her face carefully. "He looks exactly like my brother Daniel did at that age. The resemblance is extraordinary." June's expression shuttered completely, her face becoming a careful mask. "I don't know what you're talking about. It's just my son. We have no connection to your family." As if in direct contradiction to her words, a small voice called out from inside the house. "Mama? Mama Cookie?" The effect on June was immediate and devastating. Her careful mask cracked, raw emotion bleeding through as her eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. She pressed a hand to her mouth, but not before Raphael caught the slight trembling of her lips. "June," Raphael said, his voice thick with emotion. "Please, I need to know the truth. Was Daniel—" He couldn't finish the sentence, the possibility too overwhelming to voice. She stood frozen for several long moments, conflict clearly visible in her expression. Finally, her shoulders slumped in defeat. 5 minutes," she whispered. "You can come in for 5 minutes, but then you have to leave, and you can't tell anyone you were here." She turned to unlock the door, her hands shaking slightly as she worked the multiple deadbolts. As they stepped inside, Raphael took in the interior with growing concern. The living room had been arranged like a defensive position, heavy furniture positioned to create clear paths to exits, nothing that could be easily knocked over during a hasty retreat. Thick blackout curtains covered every window, and a baby monitor sat on an end table, its red light blinking steadily. In the kitchen, visible through an archway, Raphael could see supplies organized with military precision, formula, diapers, and other essentials grouped together, as if ready to be grabbed at a moment's notice. A packed diaper bag sat by the back door, and car keys hung on a hook right beside it. The patter of small feet drew his attention, and then the child appeared, running toward June with arms outstretched. He wrapped himself around her leg, pressing his face against her knee before turning to study Raphael with curious, trusting eyes. Raphael felt his breath catch in his throat. The resemblance that had been striking from a distance was devastating up close. The shape of the eyes, the curve of the cheeks, even the way the child's dark hair fell across his forehead. It was like looking at an old photograph of Daniel come to life. "Hi," the toddler said brightly, offering Raphael a dimpled smile that was so achingly familiar it made his chest hurt. June reached down to smooth the child's hair, her hand trembling slightly. "This is Elijah," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I never wanted you to find us, Mr. Devereux, because the truth—" She drew in a shaky breath, holding Elijah closer to her leg. "The truth could destroy everything." Raphael stood there, overwhelmed by the weight of unspoken revelations hanging in the air between them, as Elijah continued to watch him with Daniel's eyes in Daniel's face, innocent and unaware of the seismic shifts occurring in the adult world above his head. Inside the dim living room, the weight of secrets pressed down like a physical presence. June sank onto the edge of the couch, keeping Elijah close as he played with the hem of her shirt. Raphael remained standing, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the worn carpet. "I need to tell you something," June began, her voice barely above a whisper. "About Elijah. About your brother Daniel." She paused, gathering courage like someone preparing to dive into deep water. "Elijah is Daniel's son." Raphael's legs seemed to give out, and he dropped heavily into the nearest chair. "Daniel's—" His eyes fixed on the child, drinking in every familiar feature with new understanding. "How?" June's fingers twisted together in her lap. "I worked part-time at your Uncle Charles's house, cleaning, organizing, whatever was needed. Daniel would visit sometimes, always kind, always treating the staff like real people." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "He met Elijah's mother there. She was a gardener's assistant. They fell in love, got married in secret because they knew the family wouldn't approve. I never knew." Raphael breathed, his voice rough with emotion. "Daniel never told me. He was protecting everyone involved. But then—" June's voice caught. She pulled Elijah onto her lap, as if seeking comfort from his solid warmth. "One evening I was cleaning the study. Charles didn't know I was there. I always worked quietly. He had 2 men with him, talking about the family business, about succession rights." Her hands began to shake. They were discussing how convenient it was that Daniel had died in that accident, but that there was still one loose end to tie up: his heir. Raphael's face went ashen. "Are you saying Daniel's death wasn't an accident?" "I don't know for certain," June admitted, but they talked about eliminating the child to secure Charles's control of the family empire. They knew about Elijah, knew where he was being cared for while his mother was hospitalized with complications from the birth. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I couldn't just do nothing." Elijah reached up to pat June's wet cheek, concern crossing his small features. "Mama sad?" "No, baby," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Mama's okay." Raphael leaned forward, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. "What happened next?" June's free hand unconsciously moved to her side, where the scar lay hidden. "I started checking on Elijah whenever I could, watching for anything suspicious. Then one night—" Her voice trembled. "I was bringing some supplies to the caretaker's house. I walked in and found a man standing over Elijah's crib with a knife." Raphael made a choked sound of horror. "I didn't think," June continued. "I just moved, got between them, the knife." She swallowed hard. "I managed to fight him off, grab Elijah and run. I've been running ever since." "Why didn't you come to me?" Raphael demanded, anguish clear in his voice. "Or go to the police?" A bitter laugh escaped June's lips. "I tried, but who was going to believe me? A black housekeeper accusing one of the most powerful men in the city of attempted murder? I went to 3 different precincts. Each time I could tell they'd been warned to expect me. They dismissed everything I said, threatened to arrest me for wasting police time." She met Raphael's eyes. "Your uncle's influence runs deep, Mr. Devereaux. Money talks, and it says whatever he wants it to. So you've been protecting him alone all this time." Raphael's voice was thick with emotion. "Living in fear, watching every shadow?" June nodded, absently smoothing Elijah's dark hair. "I couldn't let anything happen to him. He's all that's left of Daniel, and he's—" Her voice broke. "He's such a good boy, so bright and loving. He deserves a chance to grow up safe and happy." Raphael stood abruptly, pacing the small room with agitated energy. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides as he struggled to process everything he'd learned. The betrayal of his uncle, the tragic fate of his brother, the courage of the woman before him. It all swirled together in a maelstrom of emotion. "All this time," he said hoarsely, "I thought I'd lost my entire family. And here you are, protecting the last piece of it with nothing but your own strength and determination." Elijah, perhaps sensing the tension in the room, slid off June's lap and toddled over to Raphael. He tugged at the man's pant leg, offering up a slightly squashed cookie from his pocket. "Share?" he asked innocently. Raphael dropped to one knee, accepting the cookie with trembling hands. The simple gesture of trust from this child, his nephew, broke something inside him. Tears spilled down his cheeks as he looked up at June. "You've been so brave," he said, voice raw with emotion. "But you don't have to do this alone anymore." The raw emotion of the moment hung heavy in the small living room. Raphael's tears seemed to break something in June's carefully maintained composure. "Mr. Devereux, please," she whispered urgently, rising from her chair. "You can't get involved. It's too dangerous." "Call me Raphael," he said gently, still kneeling with Elijah. "And I'm already involved. This isn't something I can walk away from." June's hands twisted together anxiously. "You don't understand. If they find out you know about him, if they realize you've been here—" "I understand perfectly," Raphael interrupted, his voice firm but kind. "My family has hurt you both enough. Let me help make this right." A sharp crunch of gravel outside made June freeze mid-response. Her eyes went wide with fear, and she snatched Elijah up from beside Raphael, holding him close. Another sound followed, the low purr of an engine idling. "The cameras!" June breathed, rushing to a small tablet mounted on the wall. Her fingers flew across the screen, cycling through different views of the street. Raphael moved to stand behind her, noting how her whole body trembled. The footage showed a jogger in a grey sweatsuit passing by, followed shortly by a car that slowed briefly before continuing down the street. June's shoulders sagged with relief, but the tension didn't leave her face. "This isn't the first time, is it?" Raphael asked quietly. June shook her head, bouncing Elijah gently as he started to fuss. "There have been cars circling the block these past few weeks. Different vehicles, but they all drive the same way. Slow. Watching. I've changed our schedule 3 times, but they keep finding patterns." Raphael's jaw tightened. "I'm coming. Back first thing tomorrow morning. I'll bring supplies and we can work out a proper security plan." "No!" June's voice cracked with panic. "No regular visits. They'll notice. They always notice." She clutched Elijah closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Please. We've survived this long by being careful." "And what about that scar?" Raphael challenged, though his tone remained gentle. "The one you got protecting my nephew. How many more scars are you willing to take before accepting help?" June looked away, but Raphael could see tears threatening to spill. Elijah reached out with his small hand, patting his mother's cheek as he had done earlier. "Mama scared?" the toddler asked with innocent concern. The simple question seemed to pierce June's defenses. She pressed her face into Elijah's curls, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Raphael stepped closer, placing a steadying hand on her arm. "You've carried this burden alone for so long," he murmured. "Let me help shoulder it, please." Through the window, the sky had begun to darken into dusk, casting long shadows across the room. June looked up at Raphael, studying his face as if searching for any sign of deception. Finally, she drew a shaky breath. Would you like to hold him? Properly this time?" Raphael nodded, throat tight with emotion. June carefully transferred Elijah to his arms, and the toddler immediately snuggled against his chest, small fingers gripping Raphael's tie. The trust in that simple gesture made Raphael's heart ache. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I'm your Uncle Raphael." Elijah smiled up at him, Daniel's eyes shining from that innocent face. They stood like that for several precious minutes, until June's anxiety began to show again in her constant glances at the window. "I should go," Raphael said reluctantly, passing Elijah back to June. "But I want you to know, I'm going to protect you both, whatever it takes. Just please be careful," June pleaded. "Don't let anyone know you were here." Raphael nodded solemnly. "You have my word." He lingered on the porch, watching through the window as June moved through her security routine, checking locks, adjusting cameras, drawing curtains. Only when the last light went out did he finally turn away, his chest tight with a storm of emotions. The drive home was a blur of racing thoughts and plans, each one centered on keeping his newfound family safe. Sleep proved elusive that night, his mind too full of June's story and Elijah's trusting embrace. The next morning found Raphael at his desk before sunrise, determination set in every line of his face as he began pulling up everything he could find on his uncle's recent business dealings. When June finally arrived at work, nearly 30 minutes late, the dark circles under her eyes told him she hadn't slept either. She avoided his gaze as she hurried to her desk, but he could see how her hands shook as she arranged her files. The sight only strengthened his resolve. Something had to be done. And soon. His family had caused enough damage. It was time to make things right. Raphael's fingers drummed against his desk as he waited for his contact to pick up. The phone rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. "Marcus Shaw Investigations." "Marcus, it's Raphael Devereaux. I need your most discreet team for a sensitive matter." He kept his voice low, though his office doors were closed. "It concerns my brother Daniel's estate." While Marcus took notes, Raphael pulled up old digital files he hadn't reviewed since Daniel's death. His stomach clenched at the accident reports, the hastily closed investigation. So many details that hadn't made sense at the time now screamed of careful manipulation. By midday, his eyes were burning from staring at documents. Through his office window, he could see June at her desk, her movements precise but tense as she organized files. The diaper bag beside her desk, navy blue with yellow ducks, looked out of place in the corporate setting, a reminder of her rushed morning with Elijah. Raphael pressed the intercom. "June, could you step in for a moment?" She hesitated, fingers clutching her notepad before gathering both it and the diaper bag. When she entered, her eyes immediately scanned the room. Exits, windows, possible threats. The habit made his chest ache. "Please sit," he said softly. "I want you to know I haven't taken any action that would compromise your location. The people I've contacted are trustworthy and don't have those details." June's shoulders lowered slightly, though she still perched on the edge of her seat. "Thank you. I appreciate your discretion. We need to discuss next steps." Raphael continued. "Would you be willing to meet after work? There's a small cafe 2 blocks over, the Morning Grove. It's quiet, with private booths." June twisted the strap of the diaper bag. "I shouldn't leave Elijah with the sitter longer than usual." "Bring him," Raphael suggested. "The owner's daughter often brings her kids. No one will look twice." After a long moment, June nodded. 6 o'clock? Perfect. The afternoon crawled by. When evening finally arrived, Raphael found June already waiting in a corner booth, Elijah contentedly coloring on a paper menu. The toddler's face lit up at seeing Raphael, making both adults smile despite their tension. "Uncle Raph!" Elijah called out, earning a quick shush from June. Raphael slid into the booth, ordering coffee for himself and noting June's untouched tea. Up close, he could see the exhaustion etched in her face. Shadows under her eyes, skin pale despite her warm brown complexion. "When was the last time you really slept?" he asked gently. June's laugh held no humor. "Months. We never stay in one place too long. As soon as something feels off, we move. Short-term rentals, weekly motels sometimes. The current house is the longest we've managed, 3 months next week. That's no way to live. Raphael said, watching Elijah happily scribble with crayons. I have a property in Oakwood Heights, very secure, gated community, excellent security system. No. June's voice was firm, despite its softness. Any connection to you puts a target on Elijah's back. Your uncle. He has people everywhere. The moment we're linked to you officially. She shuddered. Raphael leaned forward. Then let me at least have my security team check your current place. Discreetly. They can upgrade your systems, verify the perimeter. You trust them? June interrupted, her eyes intense. With my life. Raphael assured her. They've worked for me personally for years, completely separate from family business channels. June was quiet for a long moment, watching Elijah draw what might have been a dog or possibly a very optimistic horse. Okay, she whispered finally, but they can't be obvious about it. They'll be invisible, Raphael promised. When they finished their drinks, Raphael insisted on walking them home despite June's protests. The evening air was cool, and Elijah dozed against June's shoulder as they walked. They were nearly at the house when Raphael noticed something odd about the side gate. June. He touched her arm gently, pointing to the wood. Fresh scratches marred the surface, distinct marks that looked deliberately made. June's face went pale. Those weren't there yesterday. I check everything, every day. Those are new. Raphael pulled out his phone, already dialing. I'm calling the security team now. They'll be here within the hour, completely unmarked vehicles. June clutched Elijah tighter, eyes darting up and down the street. We should go inside. Standing out here? Of course. Raphael followed them to the door, waiting until June had checked all her cameras and locks before reluctantly preparing to leave. I'll stay parked around the corner until the team arrives. Thank you, June whispered, and the genuine gratitude in her voice made his throat tight. As he walked to his car, Raphael's mind raced with plans and contingencies. Someone was watching this house, testing boundaries. The scratches weren't random, they were a message, and he intended to make sure it was the last one they'd be able to send. The morning sun barely filtered through June's heavy curtains as she checked her security camera feeds for the 100th time. Her fingers moved mechanically across the tablet screen, switching between views of the front yard, side gate, and back door. Nothing seemed out of place, but that didn't ease the knot in her stomach. On the living room carpet, Elijah sat surrounded by wooden blocks, carefully stacking them into wobbly towers. Look, Mama, he called out proudly as another structure rose precariously toward the ceiling. That's wonderful, baby. June smiled, though her eyes kept drifting to the window. She jumped at the soft knock on the door, even though she'd been expecting it. Through the peephole, she saw Raphael standing on her porch, arms loaded with bags. She quickly undid the multiple locks and ushered him inside. I hope this is okay, he said, setting down several grocery bags and a large hardware store box. I brought some essentials, and these new security devices are top of the line. June's throat tightened at his thoughtfulness. You didn't have to, I wanted to. Raphael interrupted gently. He pulled out fresh produce, bread, milk, and other staples, arranging them on a small counter. The security team reported back to me last night. While your current setup is good, we can make it better. Uncle Raph. Elijah toddled over, arms raised. Without hesitation, Raphael scooped him up, balancing the boy on his hip as naturally as if he'd been doing it for years. Hey, buddy. Raphael smiled, his professional demeanor softening instantly. Those are some impressive towers you're building. June watched them interact, her heart aching at how easily Elijah trusted him, how much he looked like Daniel must have at that age. She busied herself putting away the groceries, while Raphael showed Elijah the new locks, explaining them in simple terms that made the toddler giggle. "This one goes beep beep when anyone comes close," Raphael demonstrated, holding up a motion sensor. "And this one has a special camera that sees in the dark, like a superhero." For the next few hours, June observed as Raphael methodically upgraded her security. He installed new deadbolts with reinforced plates, mounted additional cameras with night vision, and set up a more sophisticated alarm system. Throughout it all, he maintained a running conversation with Elijah, who followed him around like an eager puppy, offering his toy hammer to help. Around noon, June insisted on making lunch. She set out sandwiches and fruit at her small kitchen table, feeling somewhat embarrassed by the modest spread. "This is perfect," Raphael said, as if reading her thoughts. He helped Elijah into his booster seat before settling into his own chair. After a few quiet bites, he spoke softly. Daniel would have loved him so much. June looked up, catching the pain in Raphael's eyes. Daniel was different from the rest of us, Raphael continued, absently straightening Elijah's plate. He never cared about the family reputation or social standings. He'd help anyone, talk to anyone. It drove Charles crazy. "That's how I first met him," June admitted. "I was cleaning at your uncle's house, and Daniel was there for some business meeting. He saw me struggling with some heavy boxes and just helped. Didn't think twice about it. Most people in that house looked right through me." Raphael nodded. Charles always hated that about him. Said it made him weak, unfit to lead. His hands tightened around his water glass. Daniel wanted to change things, make the company more ethical, more community-focused. That's when the tension really started. June watched Elijah carefully eating his sandwich, cut into tiny squares. "I grew up being passed between aunts and cousins," she shared quietly. "My mum was sick a lot and my dad wasn't around. Every new house, I had to prove myself trustworthy all over again. Even as an adult working in these wealthy homes, it was the same thing, always having to be twice as careful, twice as perfect, just to be seen as reliable." "Is that why you didn't come to me right away?" Raphael asked gently. June nodded, blinking back sudden tears. Who would believe me? A housekeeper accusing Charles Devereux of what I heard. She swallowed hard. When I saw that man in Elijah's nursery with the knife, I just reacted. Didn't think about anything except getting between him and the baby. After that, running was the only option I could see. Raphael reached across the table, hesitating before lightly touching her hand. "You're not alone anymore." The afternoon melted into evening as Raphael finished the security installations. June prepared a simple dinner of pasta and vegetables, watching as Elijah alternated between helping her cook and showing Raphael his favorite toys. The domesticity of it all made her chest hurt. Elijah babbling happily, Raphael's deep voice responding with genuine interest, the smell of garlic and herbs filling the small kitchen. For a moment, she could almost pretend this was normal, that they were safe. After dinner, Elijah's eyes grew heavy. He insisted on a good-night hug from Uncle Raph before June carried him to bed. When she returned to the living room, Raphael was gathering his tools. "I'll come back tomorrow evening," he said quietly. "There are a few more things I want to add to the security system." June walked him to the door, checking the cameras one last time before opening it. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Raphael nodded, his expression gentle. "Lock up behind me. I'll wait in my car until I see the lights go off." Through the window, June watched him walk to his car, parked under a streetlight. For the first time since that terrible night, months ago, the weight on her shoulders felt a little lighter. She wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. Closing the curtain, she moved through her nightly security routine, checking locks, testing alarms, ensuring cameras were active. But tonight, each beep and click felt less like a barrier and more like a promise of protection. The manila folder landed on Raphael's desk with a soft thud. Inside, the private investigator's preliminary findings confirmed what he'd feared. Daniel's death investigation had been rushed, with key witnesses unexpectedly changing statements and evidence somehow misplaced. Raphael's hands shook as he read through the reports. Crime scene photos showed Daniel's car wrapped around a tree, but the skid marks didn't match the official narrative of driver error. Most damning was a notation about brake lines that had been crossed out in the final report. He glanced through his office window, watching June at her desk. She was focused on quarter-end reports, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. The sight of her working so diligently, knowing the weight she carried, made his chest tight. At 6:30 in the evening, most employees had already left. June was still organizing files when Raphael approached her desk. "Almost finished?" he asked softly. She jumped slightly, then relaxed when she saw him. "Just wrapping up these last few reports." Her eyes darted to his briefcase. "Did you find anything today?" "Yes, but not here." He kept his voice low. "Let me walk you home." June hesitated, then nodded. They left the building together, maintaining professional distance until they were several blocks away. As they walked, Raphael noticed how June unconsciously positioned herself between him and the street, a protective habit developed from months of watching for threats. The evening air was cooling when they reached her house. June checked the cameras before unlocking the door, and they found Elijah playing contentedly with his babysitter, Mrs. Chen from next door. After paying the elderly woman and seeing her out, June took Elijah upstairs for his bath while Raphael got to work. He measured the loose window frames carefully, adding weather stripping and adjusting the locks until they fit snugly. Outside, he installed motion sensor lights at strategic points around the property, testing each one methodically. The sound of splashing and Elijah's giggles drifted down from the bathroom, making him smile despite the gravity of their situation. By the time June came downstairs with a freshly bathed and pajama-clad Elijah, Raphael had finished the installations and was heating up the dinner he'd brought, simple takeout from a local deli. They ate at the kitchen table, Elijah proudly showing off how he could use his big boy fork. After dinner, with Elijah playing quietly in the corner with his blocks, Raphael spread out the investigator's files on the coffee table. June sat close, her shoulder barely touching his as they reviewed the documents together. "Look at this." Raphael pointed to a financial statement. Charles gained 51% voting control of the company exactly 3 weeks after Daniel's death. The timing can't be coincidental. June frowned, studying the numbers. But why keep Elijah's existence secret? If people knew Daniel had an heir, the succession would be locked. Raphael finished. Charles wouldn't have been able to take control. He ran a hand through his hair. There must be something we're missing. Some reason Daniel never announced the pregnancy publicly. They pored over timelines and bank records, piecing together a pattern of suspicious transfers and altered documentation. June's housekeeping experience provided unexpected insight. She recognized names of shell companies Charles had used for questionable dealings, remembered conversations overheard in his study. The serious atmosphere was broken when Elijah toddled over, clutching his favorite red toy car. He studied Raphael solemnly before placing it in his hand with a shy smile. Raphael's face softened immediately. "Is this for me, buddy?" he asked, making Elijah giggle. Raphael began racing the car along the edge of the coffee table, complete with sound effects that had the toddler squealing with delight. June watched them, her heart squeezing at how natural they looked together. For the first time in months, she felt her face muscles relax into a genuine smile. The weight of their investigation lifted momentarily as Elijah climbed into Raphael's lap, demanding, "More vroom." They played until Elijah's eyes started drooping. June carried him upstairs for bedtime, returning to find Raphael carefully organizing the files. "I should go," he said quietly. "It's getting late." June walked him to the door, checking the security monitors one last time. "Thank you," she said, "for the windows, the lights, everything." Raphael nodded, his expression gentle. "I'll see you tomorrow at work. Call me if anything feels off, no matter the time." She locked up behind him, performing her nightly security routine with practiced precision. That night, she slept better than she had in months, lulled by the quiet hum of the new security system. The peace was shattered early the next morning. June woke before dawn for her usual security check and found something that made her blood run cold, a white envelope shoved under her front door. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, eyes darting to the security monitor. The footage showed nothing, no sign of who had delivered this silent threat in the night. June's hands shook as she dialed Raphael's number, the white envelope sitting ominously on her kitchen counter like a snake ready to strike. The clock on her microwave showed 5:15 in the morning, but she couldn't wait another minute. Raphael answered on the second ring, his voice instantly alert. "June, what's wrong?" "Someone was here," she whispered, eyes darting to the security monitors. "There's an envelope. They got past the cameras somehow. I'm on my way. Don't touch it more than you already have." True to his word, Raphael arrived in less than 10 minutes, still wearing the t-shirt and sweatpants he'd clearly slept in. June let him in, checking the street carefully before closing and relocking the door. Raphael examined the envelope with careful fingers, his jaw tightening as he pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. The message, typed in plain black letters, sent chills down June's spine. "It would have been better for all of you if the child had never been born. I'm taking this to my investigators," Raphael said firmly. "They can check for fingerprints, trace the paper type." June wrapped her arms around herself, nodding. Upstairs, Elijah still slept peacefully, unaware of the threat that had slipped beneath their door in the dark. They spent the next several hours reviewing security footage together, Raphael's laptop connected to June's monitoring system. The cameras showed nothing. No movement, no shadows, no sign of an intruder. "There." June pointed to a slight blur of movement at 4:27 in the morning. "The angle's wrong, though. We can't see who it is." Raphael leaned closer, frowning. They knew exactly where the blind spots were. This wasn't random. They studied the house, learned the camera positions. June's stomach churned. She'd thought she'd been so careful, but these people were always one step ahead. As the morning wore on, Raphael made several calls to his security team and investigators, speaking in low, urgent tones. June tried to maintain their normal routine for Elijah's sake, making breakfast and setting up his toys, but her nerves were frayed. "My corporate apartment," Raphael said suddenly, ending his last call. "It's in a secure building downtown, unmarked, with 24-hour security and private elevator access. No paper trail connecting it to me. You'd both be safer there." June shook her head immediately. "We can't, Raphael. If anyone connects us to you—" "June, please. They're already closing in here." Before she could argue further, Elijah began crying from his play area. The tension in the house had finally gotten to him, his little face scrunched up in distress. Raphael moved to him instinctively, scooping the toddler into his arms. "Hey, buddy," he murmured, swaying gently. "It's okay. Everything's okay." June watched, her heart aching, as Raphael paced the living room with Elijah. He hummed softly, rubbing circles on the child's back until the sobs turned to sniffles, then to the deep breathing of sleep. The tenderness in Raphael's expression as he held his nephew made June's throat tight. The afternoon stretched into evening, and still Raphael showed no signs of leaving. He ordered dinner, helped with Elijah's bedtime routine, and then stood in her living room with his arms crossed. "I'm staying tonight," he said, not a question but a statement. June wanted to protest, to maintain the boundaries that had kept them safe so far, but exhaustion weighed on her like a heavy blanket, and the thought of facing the night alone made her hands tremble. "The couch isn't very comfortable," she said weakly. "I've slept in worse places." Raphael's smile was gentle. "Go get some rest, June. I'll keep watch." She gave in, too tired to argue further. After checking the locks one final time and kissing Elijah's sleeping forehead, June retreated to her bedroom. She lay in the darkness, listening to the quiet sounds of Raphael settling on the couch below. The steady rhythm of his breathing drifted up the stairs, slow, regular, oddly comforting. June stared at her ceiling, feeling safer than she had in months, yet somehow more vulnerable than ever. In her experience, safety always came with strings attached, with expectations and demands that eventually became too heavy to bear. But Raphael's presence felt different. He asked for nothing, demanded nothing, simply offered protection without conditions. That scared her more than any threat, because it made her want to trust, to lean on someone else's strength. And trust, she'd learned the hard way, was the most dangerous thing of all. Still, as she lay there in the dark, the sound of Raphael's breathing continued its steady pattern, like a shield between her family and the dangers lurking outside. June remained awake, torn between gratitude and fear, knowing that tomorrow would bring new decisions, new risks, and perhaps new reasons to both trust and doubt. The morning dawned crisp and clear, bringing with it a fragile sense of normalcy. June stood at the kitchen counter, spreading peanut butter on whole wheat bread, while Elijah sat in his high chair, happily munching on banana slices. The routine felt almost peaceful, deceptively so. Raphael arrived early, toolbox in hand, determined to fix the exterior light that had been flickering the night before. June watched through the kitchen window as he worked, his movements precise and focused. Elijah pointed and babbled whenever Raphael passed by the window, earning a warm smile and wave each time. "All done with breakfast, sweetheart?" June wiped Elijah's sticky fingers and face, pressing a kiss to his curls. He nodded, reaching up for a hug that she gladly gave. Inside, June moved through her morning tasks with practiced efficiency. She sorted through tiny t-shirts and pants, folding each item with care before placing them in neat piles. Elijah helped by occasionally grabbing a sock or onesie, showing it to her proudly before adding it to his own special pile. "That's right, baby," she encouraged softly. "You're such a good helper." Raphael came back inside, wiping his hands on a rag. "Lights fixed. Should be more reliable now." "Thank you." June offered him a small smile. "Would you like some coffee?" He checked his watch and shook his head. "I need to pick up some documents from my lawyer. Shouldn't take more than an hour." His expression grew serious. "You'll be okay?" June nodded, though her stomach tightened slightly. "We'll be fine. The new security system is working perfectly." Raphael knelt to say goodbye to Elijah, who immediately toddled over for a hug. "Be good for June, buddy. I'll be back soon." After Raphael left, June continued with the laundry while Elijah played nearby with his blocks. The house felt suddenly larger, quieter without Raphael's presence. She pushed away the unease, reminding herself that they were safe, protected by multiple locks and cameras. When she noticed the mail truck passing by, June decided to quickly check the mailbox. It was just steps from the front door. Surely it would be fine for just a moment. Elijah was contentedly building a tower in the living room. "Mama will be right back, sweetheart," she said, though she knew he was too young to truly understand. "Just getting the mail." The short walk to the mailbox felt exposed, but June forced herself to move at a normal pace. She retrieved the few envelopes inside, already turning back towards the house when her heart stopped. The front door stood slightly ajar, though she distinctly remembered closing and locking it. "Elijah?" Her voice cracked as she rushed forward. "Elijah!" The living room was empty. His blocks lay scattered, his favorite blanket crumpled on the floor where it had fallen, or been dropped. June's chest constricted, panic clawing at her throat. "Elijah!" She ran toward the hallway, her feet barely touching the ground. A man's voice, low and threatening, came from somewhere ahead. "Stay out of this if you know what's good for you. This isn't your fight. Please!" June screamed, racing toward the sound. "Please, don't take him! Elijah!" She caught a glimpse of a dark figure disappearing through the back door, something small and precious bundled in his arms. Elijah's frightened cry cut through the air like a knife. "No, no, no!" June stumbled after them, but her legs gave out. She collapsed to the floor, her entire body shaking with sobs. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything they'd done to stay safe. The front door burst open minutes, or maybe seconds, later. Raphael's footsteps pounded through the house. "June, what happened? I heard screaming from outside." He stopped short, taking in the scene before him. "Where's Elijah?" June couldn't speak through her tears. She pointed weakly toward the back door, still open to the empty yard beyond. Raphael pulled her to her feet, supporting her weight as her knees threatened to buckle again. "They took him," she finally managed, the words tearing from her throat. "I just went to get the mail. Just for a moment. Oh God, Raphael, they took him." Raphael's face drained of color, but his arm remained steady around her waist. "When? How long ago?" "Minutes, just minutes." June pressed her fist to her mouth, trying to hold back another sob. "There was a man. He said to stay out of it. Said it wasn't my fight." Raphael guided her toward Elijah's room, though she resisted at first, not wanting to see the empty space. That's when they spotted it. A piece of paper taped to the crib rails, the message stark against the white sheet. "You should have stayed quiet." The sound that came from June's throat was raw, primal. Raphael already had his phone out, dialing with one hand while the other kept June from collapsing again. "This is Raphael Devereaux." His voice was steel, even as his hand trembled. "I need to report a kidnapping. Yes, right now. Send everyone." June sagged against him, her tears soaking into his shirt. The room spun around her, Elijah's absence of physical pain in her chest. All their precautions, all their careful planning, had failed. Her baby was gone, taken by the very people they'd been hiding from, and the magnitude of that reality threatened to destroy her completely. Raphael's arm tightened around her as he continued speaking to the authorities, his heartbeat racing where her head rested against his chest. They stood together in the doorway of the empty nursery, both shattered by the same devastating truth. Their worst nightmare had just become reality. The quiet neighborhood erupted into chaos as police vehicles surrounded June's small house. Red and blue lights flashed against the windows, casting eerie shadows across walls that had, just hours ago, echoed with Elijah's laughter. Officers moved swiftly through each room, photographing evidence and dusting for fingerprints. In the living room, a female detective sat across from June, notebook open. "Mrs. Wallace, I know this is difficult, but I need you to walk me through exactly what happened." June's hands shook as she clutched the glass of water Raphael had given her. I just went to check the mail." Her voice cracked. "He was right here, playing with his blocks. I was only gone for a minute, maybe less." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Across the room, Raphael answered questions from another detective, his shoulders tense. Though separated, his eyes kept finding June, watching for signs she needed him. And you're certain the door was locked? The female detective pressed. June nodded, the motion jerky. Yes, I always check twice. Always. The water in her glass rippled from her trembling. This is my fault. I never should have left him, not even for a second. Raphael started to move toward her, but the detective interviewing him asked another question, holding him in place. Mrs. Wallace, this isn't your fault. The female detective said gently. From what you've told us, this was clearly planned. They were watching, waiting for an opportunity. June's breath hitched. The thought of someone watching them, studying their routines, made her stomach turn. Raphael finally broke away from his interview, crossing to kneel beside her chair. Here, you need to drink something, he murmured, steadying her hands around the glass. His presence grounded her, even as guilt and fear threatened to pull her under. The questioning continued through the morning, each detail picked apart and examined. June felt hollowed out, answering the same questions repeatedly while trying not to picture Elijah scared and crying for her. By early afternoon, Raphael made a decision. We're moving this to my office, he announced, his tone leaving no room for argument. We'll continue cooperating fully, but we need privacy to coordinate our efforts. The drive to his office was silent, June staring unseeingly out the window. The familiar corporate building felt strange now, disconnected from the nightmare they were living. Raphael led her to his private office, closing the door on the curious stares of employees who had never seen their CEO so visibly distressed. June sank into one of the leather chairs, exhaustion weighing on her like a physical thing. Then suddenly she sat up straight, her eyes widening. The envelope, she whispered. Raphael turned from where he'd been pouring coffee. What? The threatening envelope from yesterday? June's voice grew stronger. There was something... a smell. I didn't think about it then, but... She closed her eyes, remembering. It was cologne, expensive. I only ever smelled it one place, in Charles's home when I worked there. Raphael set the coffee down hard enough to slosh liquid over the rim. Are you certain? Yes. June's fingers twisted together in her lap. It's distinctive, the kind of scent that fills a room. I used to hold my breath while cleaning his study because it was so strong. Raphael moved to his computer, fingers flying over the keyboard. Security logs, he explained tersely. I can access reports from all family properties. His face grew more intent as he scrolled. Charles has been to the Mountain Estate 3 times in the past 2 weeks. That place hasn't seen regular use in years. The Mountain Estate. June leaned forward. It's isolated, miles from the nearest neighbor. Raphael's jaw clenched. Perfect place to hide someone you don't want found. June stood up, suddenly energized by purpose. That's where they'd take him. Somewhere without witnesses, somewhere they control completely. Her voice shook, but held determination. We have to go now. Raphael was already reaching for his phone. I'm arranging transportation. Pack whatever you need, just essentials. His eyes met hers, fierce with protective rage. I'm done letting my uncle hurt the people I care about. We're bringing Elijah home. June nodded, her fear transforming into steel in her spine. They had been reactive for too long, trying to stay hidden, trying to stay safe. But now Charles had taken her child, and she would walk through fire to get him back. I'll be ready in 10 minutes, she said, already moving towards the door. The time for running and hiding was over. Now they would fight. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the highway as Raphael's car headed north, away from the city's crowded streets. June sat rigid in the passenger seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, watching the urban landscape gradually give way to rolling countryside. We should reach the estate in about 2 hours, Raphael said quietly, breaking the heavy silence that had settled between them. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. June nodded, unable to find her voice. Every mile that passed felt both too slow and too fast, bringing them closer to Elijah, but also to confrontation with the people who had taken him. I should have seen it sooner. Raphael spoke again, his voice thick with regret. The signs were there. The way Charles slowly took control of everything after my father died. How he isolated Daniel, pushed him out of decisions. He swallowed hard. I told myself I was staying neutral, being professional. But really I was just afraid to rock the boat. June turned to look at him, seeing the pain etched in his profile. You couldn't have known how far he would go. I should have, Raphael insisted. When Daniel died, I knew something wasn't right. The investigation felt rushed, incomplete, but I let myself believe the official story because it was easier. His laugh was bitter. Some protector I turned out to be. Hey. June reached over, touching his arm lightly. You're trying to make it right now. That counts for something. Raphael glanced at her gratefully before returning his eyes to the road. What about you? What happens after we get Elijah back? June's throat tightened. I don't know, she admitted. Who's going to believe my word against Charles Devereux? She gestured helplessly. I'm just the housekeeper who disappeared with a baby. They'll say I kidnapped him, that I made everything up. I believe you, Raphael said firmly. And I have resources, influence. We'll find a way to protect you both legally. But what if we can't? June's voice cracked. What if they take him away? Rich men like your uncle, they always win in the end. Raphael was quiet for a long moment, considering. Maybe they usually do, he said finally. But they're not usually fighting against someone as brave as you. He smiled slightly. I've seen how far you'll go to protect Elijah. Charles has no idea what he's up against. Warmth bloomed in June's chest at his words. She had spent so long feeling alone, carrying the weight of fear and responsibility by herself. Having someone believe in her, stand beside her, it made her feel stronger somehow. The sun sank lower as they drove, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. June watched the colors fade into darkness, trying to hold on to her renewed determination. As night fully fell, Raphael turned onto a narrow road that wound up into heavily wooded hills. Almost there, he murmured, slowing the car. The gate should be just ahead. June peered through the darkness until she made out the shape of a tall iron gate. Raphael pulled up to a keypad and punched in a code. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a grinding sound, the gate began to swing open. They crept forward onto a long gravel driveway that curved through the trees. Raphael kept the headlights off, letting the car idle forward slowly in the darkness. After what felt like forever, they rounded a bend and caught sight of warm lights glowing in the distance. The main house is dark, Raphael whispered, though there was no one to hear them. But there's light in one of the guest houses. June leaned forward, straining to see. The guest house was set apart from the main building, partially hidden by trees. As they watched, a shadow moved past one of the windows. Suddenly, a familiar sound carried through the night air, the distinctive fussy cry that June had heard countless times during midnight feedings and early morning wake-ups. Elijah, she breathed, grabbing Raphael's arm. That's him. I know. His cry anywhere. Raphael guided the car off the drive, concealing it behind a thick stand of trees. They sat for a moment in the darkness, hearts pounding. Are you ready? Raphael asked softly. June nodded, her protective instincts surging as another cry pierced the night. Sharper this time, distressed. Every fiber of her being yearned to run to her child, fear forgotten in the face of Elijah's need. "Let's go get our boy," she whispered, and opened her door. Raphael pulled out a sleek black satellite phone, his fingers moving swiftly across the keypad. "This is Raphael Devereaux." He spoke in hushed but urgent tones. "I need immediate police response at 3721 Mountain Pine Road. Multiple suspects, possible kidnapping situation." He rattled off more details while June's attention fixed on the lit windows of the guest house. Elijah's cry came again, clearer now in the still night air. June's heart clenched at the fear in his voice. She couldn't wait, not while her baby needed her. While Raphael continued coordinating with law enforcement, she crept toward the building, staying in the shadows. The side door wasn't just unlocked, it had been left slightly ajar, as if someone had gone out for a smoke break and hadn't bothered to secure it properly. June's housekeeping experience made her movements silent as she slipped inside, keeping close to the wall. The interior was warm and musty, smelling of old wood and neglect. She followed the sound of Elijah's whimpers down a narrow hallway, past closed doors and dark rooms. At the very back of the house, light spilled from beneath a door. June's hands trembled as she eased it open. There he was, her precious boy, sitting on a thick rug in the center of the room. His face was tear-stained, but he appeared physically unharmed. When he saw her, his eyes lit up. "Mama!" he called out, arms reaching for her. June rushed forward, gathering him into her arms, breathing in his familiar baby scent. "I'm here, baby," she whispered, rocking him gently. "I'm here now." Elijah buried his face in her neck, his small body trembling. Heavy footsteps in the hall made her freeze. A shadow fell across the doorway, and June turned to face whoever had taken her child. "Well," a familiar voice said. "I certainly wasn't expecting to see you here." June's breath caught as she recognized Thomas Devereaux, Raphael's cousin, a man she'd seen at numerous family functions while working for Charles. He'd always seemed kind, professional, trustworthy. Now his handsome face was twisted with contempt. "Why?" June demanded, holding Elijah tighter. "Why would you do this?" Thomas stepped into the room, his expensive shoes clicking against the hardwood. "Do you have any idea what that child's existence means?" he asked, gesturing toward Elijah. "The chaos it would cause? Daniel was never supposed to have an heir." "He's just a baby," June protested. "He's innocent in all this." "Innocent?" Thomas laughed, bitterly. "That innocent baby threatens everything we've worked for. When Daniel died, control of the company was supposed to pass to those of us who understood business, who could maintain the family legacy properly." His voice rose with each word. "But if people learn about him, about Daniel's legitimate heir, everything gets thrown into question. Years of careful planning, destroyed by one inconvenient child." June backed away slowly, angling herself between Thomas and the door. "So you and Charles decided to just, what, make him disappear? It would have been cleaner if you hadn't interfered." Thomas spat. "Playing hero, running away with him. Do you know how much trouble you've caused? How many loose ends we've had to manage? You mean how many people you've had to threaten, to hurt?" June's voice shook with anger. "I saw what you were willing to do to an innocent baby. I couldn't just stand by." "You should have stayed quiet," Thomas shouted, making Elijah whimper. "You should have known your place." Suddenly, Raphael's voice cut through the tension. "And what place is that, Thomas?" They all turned to see Raphael standing in the doorway, his normally composed face dark with fury. He moved quickly to stand between June and his cousin. "Raphael." Thomas's tone turned placating. "You don't understand. We did this for the family, for the company." "You did it for yourself?" Raphael growled. "You and Charles both. You saw a chance to grab power and you took it. even if it meant hurting a child, even if it meant killing my brother. Thomas's face hardened. Daniel was weak. He would have run the company into the ground. We did what had to be done. In the distance, police sirens began to wail. Thomas's eyes widened with panic as he realized what was happening. "It's over," Raphael said firmly. "The police are coming. We have evidence of everything. The threats, the attempted murder, all of it. You're done." Thomas lunged forward suddenly, but Raphael was ready. He blocked the attack, keeping himself between Thomas and June as she clutched Elijah tightly. The sirens grew louder, and red and blue lights began to flash through the windows. Within moments, the house was swarming with officers. They burst through doors and flooded the hallways, weapons drawn. Thomas was quickly subdued and cuffed, along with 2 other men found in the main house. Through it all, June stood trembling in the corner, face pressed into Elijah's curls as silent tears rolled down her cheeks. The nightmare was finally ending, but the weight of everything, the fear, the relief, the sheer exhaustion, overwhelmed her completely. Raphael stayed close, his hand steady on her shoulder as she cried, while Elijah's tiny fingers clutched her shirt, safe at last in his mother's arms. Morning sunlight streamed through the precinct windows as June sat in yet another interview room, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. She'd lost count of how many times she'd retold the story. Every detail, every threat, every fearful night spent watching over Elijah. Raphael sat beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. He hadn't left her side since they'd returned to the city, making sure she had water, food, and brief breaks between the seemingly endless questioning sessions. "And you're certain it was Charles Devereaux who made the initial threats?" Detective Martinez asked, her pen poised over her notebook. June nodded wearily. "Yes, I was cleaning in his study that evening when I overheard him discussing how to eliminate Elijah." Her voice caught on the words. "He said the child would complicate the succession plans." Raphael's hand found hers under the table, offering silent support. "The security footage from your home shows multiple instances of surveillance." Detective Martinez continued. "Can you walk us through those again?" For the next hour, June detailed every suspicious car, every strange noise, every moment of heart-stopping fear she'd endured while protecting Elijah. The detective's questions were thorough but kind, understanding the trauma June had experienced. Outside the interview room, the precinct buzzed with activity. News of the Devereaux scandal had broken early that morning, sending shockwaves through the business community. Reporters gathered outside the building, hungry for details about the attempted murder of an heir, the kidnapping, and the corruption that had finally been exposed. When they finally finished the formal statements, Raphael guided June through a private exit to avoid the press. In the car, she leaned back against the leather seat, exhaustion written in every line of her face. "The company's PR team is handling the media," Raphael explained softly. "But there's already significant fallout. The board is in chaos." June turned to look at him. "What will happen now?" "Charles and his conspirators are being formally charged," Raphael said, his jaw tightening. "Attempted murder, kidnapping, fraud. The list keeps growing as we uncover more evidence. I've suspended all board members with known connections to their schemes, and our forensic accountants are conducting complete audits." June closed her eyes, remembering all the times she'd seen those board members in the hallways, never knowing they were part of the plot against Elijah. "I still can't believe how deep it went." "Neither can I," Raphael admitted. "I should have seen it sooner. The signs were there." The car wound through city streets toward the police station, where Elijah was being watched by a kind-hearted officer. June had been reluctant to let him out of her sight, but the investigators had needed her full attention for the statements. When they arrived, Elijah's face lit up at the sight of them. He was sitting on the floor with a pile of donated toys, happily showing his new police officer friend how to stack blocks. "Mama!" he called out, toddling over to June. She scooped him up, holding him close. Officer Chen kept him entertained. The desk sergeant explained with a smile. Even shared her lunch with him. June turned to the young officer. "Thank you," she said softly, "for watching over him." Officer Chen waved off the thanks. "It was my pleasure. He's a wonderful little boy." She paused, then added more seriously, "What you did to protect him, that was incredibly brave. We don't see that kind of courage every day." June felt her cheeks warm at the praise. Throughout the morning, various law enforcement officials had commended her actions, amazed at how she'd managed to keep Elijah safe for so long with such limited resources. But she hadn't felt brave. She'd just done what needed to be done. Raphael watched the exchange with quiet pride. "June," he said gently, "you should rest. Both of you. My corporate apartment is secure. Full building security, private elevator access. You can stay as long as you need to." June started to protest, but exhaustion made her words fade. The past 24 hours had drained what little energy she had left after months of constant vigilance. "Please," Raphael added, "just until things settle, for Elijah's sake, if not your own." She looked down at Elijah, who was already starting to doze against her shoulder, and finally nodded. The corporate apartment occupied the entire top floor of a luxury building downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered stunning views of the city, while state-of-the-art security systems provided the safety June craved. Raphael showed them to the guest suite, where a pack and play had already been set up for Elijah. "The kitchen is stocked," he explained, "and there's a direct line to building security on every phone. You're completely safe here." June laid Elijah down for his nap, tucking his favorite blanket around him. When she returned to the living room, she found Raphael sitting on the plush sofa, his tie loosened and jacket discarded. "I should head back to the office," he said reluctantly. "There's still so much to handle with the company." "Of course," June replied quickly. "You've already done so much." Raphael stood, but hesitated. "Will you be all right here?" June managed a small smile. "Yes, we both will be." He nodded and gathered his things, but paused at the door. "June, thank you for protecting him when I couldn't, for being stronger than any of us deserved." Before she could respond, they heard Elijah's sleepy voice calling from the bedroom. Raphael followed her back to check on him, watching as the toddler reached out with grabby hands. To June's surprise, Raphael lifted Elijah from the pack and play, and the little boy immediately settled against his chest with a contented sigh. June sank into the comfortable armchair nearby, watching them together. For the first time in months, she felt truly safe. But as she observed Raphael gently soothing Elijah back to sleep, she couldn't help wondering what would happen next. Their world had been completely upended, again, and the future was more uncertain than ever. Still, as Elijah's soft breaths evened out and Raphael hummed a quiet lullaby, June allowed herself to hope that whatever came next, they wouldn't have to face it alone. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Raphael's corporate apartment, casting warm light across the pristine kitchen counters. June stood at the refrigerator, methodically arranging groceries on the shelves. The routine task felt oddly comforting after days of chaos and uncertainty. "The yogurt goes here," she muttered to herself, creating a dedicated space for Elijah's favorite snack. "And the fruit down low where he can see it." From his spot at the dining table, Raphael looked up from the stack of legal documents spread before him. He watched June organize the kitchen with the same careful attention she'd always shown at work, though now there was a softer edge to her movements, a hint of belonging starting to emerge. The The guardianship papers are almost finalized, he said, tapping his pen against the stack. The lawyers have expedited everything, given the circumstances. June paused, a bunch of bananas in her hands. That's good, she said softly. Elijah needs that security. As if summoned by his name, Elijah toddled into the kitchen, clutching his favorite stuffed elephant. Nanas, he exclaimed, pointing at the fruit in June's hands. She smiled, breaking off one banana and kneeling to help him peel it. That's right, sweetie. Would you like some breakfast? Raphael set aside his papers and joined them in the kitchen, watching as June efficiently prepared Elijah's morning routine: sliced banana, a small bowl of yogurt, and tiny pieces of toast. She knew exactly how he liked everything arranged on his plate, the product of countless mornings caring for him in hiding. They fell into an easy rhythm over the next few days. Mornings began with shared breakfast, Raphael reading the news on his tablet, while June helped Elijah navigate his spoon. By mid-morning, they would venture down to the building's private courtyard, where Elijah could safely toddle around the manicured paths under the watchful eyes of both June and the security team. Look at the butterfly, June would say, pointing to the flowers that attracted colorful visitors. Elijah would squeal with delight, attempting to chase them while Raphael hovered nearby, ready to catch him if he stumbled. Afternoons brought nap time, during which June would usually organize some aspect of their temporary home, while Raphael worked remotely. The apartment was spacious enough that they could maintain comfortable distance when needed, but they found themselves gradually gravitating closer together, sharing quiet conversations over coffee or working side by side at the dining table. One particular afternoon, as June folded tiny t-shirts and matched miniature socks, she caught herself humming, something she hadn't done in months. The simple act of domestic peace struck her so forcefully that she had to sit down, overcome by emotion. Raphael found her there, perched on the edge of Elijah's bed, surrounded by half-folded laundry. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. She nodded, wiping quickly at her eyes. "Yes, I forgot what it felt like. To not be afraid every minute." He sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. The security team is top-notch, and the legal team is making sure Charles and his accomplices won't see daylight for a very long time." "I know," June said quietly. "But sometimes I wonder, what happens next? Where do I fit in all of this?" Raphael started to respond, but Elijah's sleepy cries from his nap interrupted them. June rose automatically, moving to comfort him with the instincts of a mother. Raphael watched as she gathered the toddler close, whispering soothing words until his fussing subsided. The evenings became their time for deeper discussions. After Elijah was tucked into bed, they would sit in the living room, planning for his future. Raphael brought up preschools, medical care, trust funds, all the practical matters that needed attention. June contributed invaluable insights about Elijah's personality, his likes and dislikes, his little quirks that only someone who had cared for him day and night would know. "He won't sleep without his elephant," she explained one evening, "and he likes when you hum Twinkle, Twinkle exactly 3 times, no more, no less." Raphael smiled, making notes on his phone. "What would I do without you? You know him better than anyone." The comment hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. June shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, tucking her feet beneath her. "I should start looking for a new place," she said quietly. "Now that everything's safer, I mean. I don't want to impose—" "June." Raphael set down his phone, turning to face her fully. "I've been wanting to talk to you about that." He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I want you to stay. Not as an employee, not out of any sense of obligation, but because Elijah needs you. You're his home." June's eyes filled with tears, and she looked down at her hands. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now, Raphael assured her, but I need you to know something. He waited until she met his gaze again. You matter here, not just for what you've done, but for who you are. When was the last time someone told you that? A sob caught in June's throat. I can't remember, she whispered. It's been years since I felt wanted anywhere, since I felt secure. Raphael reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and covered her hand with his. Listen to me, he said, his voice gentle but firm. As long as I have breath in my body, no one will ever threaten you or Elijah again. You're both safe here. You're both wanted here. The tears spilled over then, years of loneliness and fear, finally finding release in the safety of that moment. June's shoulders shook with silent sobs as Raphael kept his hand over hers, offering quiet support until the storm passed. The morning dawned clear and bright, a gentle breeze rustling through the trees as June helped Elijah into his Sunday best, a tiny button-down shirt and khaki pants that Raphael had brought home one evening. The toddler squirmed as she combed his hair, but his eyes sparkled with excitement at the prospect of going somewhere new. Almost done, sweet boy, June murmured, smoothing down a stubborn cowlick. In the mirror's reflection, she caught sight of Raphael adjusting his tie in the doorway. He'd been quiet all morning, lost in thought. Are you sure you're ready for this? He asked softly. June nodded, lifting Elijah into her arms. We need this, all of us. The drive to the small stone church took only 15 minutes, but June's heart raced the entire way. It had been months since she'd attended a service, months of hiding, of prayers whispered in dark rooms, of wondering if God had forgotten them entirely. The church stood nestled among ancient oaks, its wooden doors thrown wide in welcome. As they approached, an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes stepped forward to greet them. Welcome, welcome, she said warmly, reaching out to touch Elijah's cheek. I'm Martha. We've been praying for you all week, ever since Raphael called. June's eyes welled with tears at the simple acceptance in the woman's voice. No judgment, no questions, just pure Christian love. Inside, the sanctuary glowed with morning light streaming through stained glass windows. The congregation was small, mostly elderly couples, who smiled and nodded as Raphael led them to a pew near the middle. Elijah settled between them, immediately fascinated by the hymnal in the pocket before him. The service began with soft organ music, and June found herself swaying slightly as familiar hymns washed over her. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed this. The sense of community, of shared faith, of being part of something bigger than herself. The pastor, a gentle-voiced man with weathered hands, spoke about healing and God's protective love. Sometimes, he said, looking directly at their pew, the Lord works through the courage of ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. Sometimes our darkest moments lead us to our greatest blessings. June felt Raphael's hand brush against hers on the pew, and she gripped it tightly, remembering all the dark moments that had led them here. Elijah leaned against her side, thumb in his mouth, peaceful and safe. After the sermon, several congregation members approached them, offering hugs and words of encouragement. An elderly man pressed cookies wrapped in a napkin into Elijah's hands, while his wife squeezed June's shoulder and whispered, "You're home now, dear." Raphael guided them toward the altar, where 3 unlit candles waited. The morning sun caught the brass cross above, sending golden light dancing across their faces. June lifted Elijah so he could see better as Raphael struck the first match. "For Daniel," Raphael said softly, lighting the first candle. His hand trembled slightly as he added, My brother, who loved purely and died protecting that love. The second candle flickered to life under June's steady hand. For Elijah's protection, she whispered, past, present, and future. The third candle they lit together, Raphael's hand covering June's as they held the match. For courage, they said in unison, and for faith restored. Elijah reached toward the dancing flames, fascinated by their light. Pretty, he murmured. June held him closer, breathing in his sweet baby scent as tears slid down her cheeks. I was so afraid, she confessed quietly. During those months of hiding, of running, I felt so alone. I wondered if God had abandoned us. Raphael turned to her, his eyes soft with understanding. And now? Now I see his hand in everything, she said, her voice growing stronger. Even in the painful moments, he led me to Elijah. He gave me the strength to protect him. He brought us to you. No, Raphael corrected gently, taking her free hand. You brought him to me. You saved the last piece of my brother when you didn't even know who he was. You risked everything to protect an innocent child. His voice caught. I'll spend the rest of my life thanking you for that. Elijah chose that moment to wiggle down from June's arms. Instead of running off, though, he simply stood between them, wrapping one arm around each of their legs. The gesture, so innocent and yet so profound, brought fresh tears to June's eyes. Together they walked toward the church doors, stepping into the bright Sunday morning sunshine. June blinked, adjusting to the light, and felt something settle in her heart, a peace she'd never known before. Here, with Elijah's small hand in hers and Raphael's steady presence beside them, she finally understood what it meant to be truly safe, to be cherished, to be family. The breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, and somewhere nearby, church bells began to ring. Elijah skipped between them, his laughter pure and bright as they walked toward their future. A future built not on secrets and fear, but on truth, hope, and the kind of love that could heal generations. The early morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of the corporate apartment, casting gentle shadows across June's bedroom walls. She lay still for a moment, savoring the peaceful quiet that had become her new normal. Through the partially open door, she could hear the familiar sounds that now meant home, the soft whir of the coffee maker, Raphael's quiet footsteps in the kitchen, and Elijah's happy morning chatter. 1 month had passed since that transformative Sunday at the church, and each day since had felt like another step toward healing. June stretched and slipped out of bed, pulling on her comfortable robe, a gift from Raphael that still made her smile with its softness. In the living room, Elijah sat cross-legged on the plush carpet, completely absorbed in his morning ritual of building block towers. His dark curls were still mussed from sleep, and his dinosaur pajamas were slightly twisted from his energetic play. "And then it falls down," he announced gleefully, knocking over his latest creation. The blocks clattered across the floor as he dissolved into giggles. Raphael appeared from the kitchen, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. His tie was loose around his neck, his usual formality softened by the morning light and Elijah's infectious joy. "Someone's having fun already," he observed, handing June her coffee, perfectly prepared with just a touch of cream, exactly how she liked it. "Morning," June said softly, accepting both the coffee and the gentle brush of his hand against hers. These quiet moments still felt precious, almost surreal after months of constant fear and vigilance. They shared a simple breakfast together, scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh fruit for Elijah, who insisted on feeding himself despite getting more banana on his chin than in his mouth. Raphael wiped the little boy's face with practiced patience, something that still amazed June to witness. "I thought we might visit the memorial garden today," Raphael suggested, his voice carrying a note of gentle purpose. "It's been completed, and the weather's perfect." June nodded, feeling the familiar mix of emotions that came with anything connected to Daniel's memory. "I'd like that," she said quietly. They dressed Elijah in his favorite blue outfit, complete with tiny sneakers that lit up when he walked. The drive to the company headquarters was short, filled with Elijah's running commentary about the cars and buildings they passed. The memorial garden occupied a peaceful corner of the corporate grounds, sheltered by mature oak trees that provided dappled shade. June's breath caught as they approached. It was beautiful, not ostentatious or cold like corporate monuments often were, but intimate and thoughtful. Natural stone pathways wound between carefully tended flower beds, and at the center stood a simple but elegant fountain. Along the paths, plaques were set at intervals, each one telling a different story of courage and justice. Raphael led them to a particular marker, his hand steady at the small of June's back. Daniel's plaque was crafted from polished bronze, the engraved letters catching the afternoon light. Below his name and dates were the words, "Beloved brother, father, and champion of truth." Elijah toddled forward, reaching out to trace the letters with curious fingers. "What does it say?" he asked, looking up at them with Daniel's eyes. June knelt beside him, her voice soft but steady. "It's your daddy's name, sweetheart. He was a very brave and kind man." Raphael placed the fresh flowers they'd brought, white lilies and blue forget-me-nots, in the holder beside the plaque. His hand found June's, their fingers intertwining naturally, comfortably. "The legal team finished processing the last of the guardianship papers yesterday," Raphael said after a while, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her hand. "Everything's official now. No one can ever question Elijah's place in the family again." June squeezed his hand, watching Elijah explore a nearby butterfly bush with delighted fascination. "I've been looking at that preschool near home," she shared. "The one with the art program you mentioned. They have an opening for fall." "He'd love that," Raphael agreed, smiling as Elijah ran back to show them a leaf he'd found. "You're sure you're comfortable with starting him in school?" June nodded. "We can't keep him in a protective bubble forever. He needs to grow, to make friends." She paused, then added softly, "Just like we need to keep growing too." They spent nearly an hour in the garden, letting Elijah explore while they talked about the future. Plans for his education, ideas for making their home even more child-friendly, the upcoming holiday season they would share as a family. Each conversation felt like another brick in the foundation they were building together. As the afternoon began to fade, they headed home. Elijah fell asleep in his car seat, clutching the special leaf he'd insisted on keeping. Raphael ordered takeout from their favorite restaurant, a simple routine that had become precious in its normalcy. Later that evening, they sat together on the large sectional sofa, Elijah sprawled across both their laps, sound asleep after his busy day. June rested her head against Raphael's shoulder, breathing in the peaceful quiet. "Sometimes I still catch myself holding my breath," she admitted softly, waiting for something to go wrong. "Then I look at him, at you, at this life we've built, and I remember, we're stronger than anything that tried to break us." Raphael's arm tightened around her shoulders, and he pressed a gentle kiss to her temple. "We always will be," he promised, as Elijah shifted in his sleep, one small hand curled trustingly around June's finger. "Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe. And tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart."